Israel is facing intensifying condemnation over the killing of 7 aid workers amid growing calls for thorough investigations into the incident. The group was hit after it unloaded more than 100 tons of food brought to Gaza by sea, marking a potential major setback in efforts to deliver much-needed aid to the besieged enclave. Now, among the 7 who died, 3 were British. The others were a US-Canadian dual citizen, an Australian, a Pole and a Palestinian. It brings the total number of aid workers killed in Gaza to nearly 200. Canada has called on Israel to respect international law. The US has voiced outrage, with President Joe Biden accusing Israel of not doing enough to protect aid workers in Gaza. Britain and Australia summoned Israel's ambassadors and demanded a thorough probe. While Poland's Prime Minister says the strike is straining ties between the two countries. Israel is blaming the airstrikes on a World Central Kitchen convoy in Gaza on misidentification. According to Israeli media, the military thought a Hamas militant was in the convoy and used a drone to fire 3 missiles. Footage released showed the vehicle with the charity's logo alongside the wreckage of other vehicles. A World Central Kitchen has suspended its operations in the region. It began sending food aid to Gaza by sea barely 3 weeks ago. Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Council is set to reconsider a draft resolution calling for an arms embargo on Israel on Friday, citing the, quote, plausible risk of genocide in Gaza. The text condemns the use of explosive weapons with wide area effects by Israel in populated areas of Gaza. It also demands that Israel, quote, uphold its legal responsibility to prevent genocide. Now, the draft was proposed by Pakistan on behalf of 55 out of 56 UN member nations in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC. Well, let's get more now from Alex Cadier, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Alex, Israel's military chief saying there will be an independent body looking into the attack on World Central Kitchen's convoy. What more do we know?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Herzl Halevi, the chief of the general staff of the IDF, saying that there will be a fact-finding investigation in exactly what happened. We understand that it is the fact-checking or the fact-finding mechanism of the Israeli Defense Forces that will be looking into this particular incident, and that independent experts will also be brought. But crucially, we heard from Herzl Halevi, the head of the Israeli army, saying that the information will be shared with World Central Kitchen and other relevant organizations. We also heard Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that the findings of this investigation will be made public. It will be swift. It will be thorough. That is what the Prime Minister's office communicated as well. Now, Herzl Halevi, the head of the Israeli army, also saying that this will be concluded in a matter of days, and that under enormous pressure from the international community, from Israel's allies, from aid agencies operating in Gaza to get answers. Now, in Israeli media, particularly in the newspaper Haaretz, we've seen reporting about what may have happened, in which is that the IDF suspected that an armed man was initially traveling with the convoy in a truck that traveled with those 3 cars into a warehouse, but then the 3 cars left the warehouse without the armed man, without the truck, and yet were still struck 3 times on 3 separate occasions, each car one by one, by an Israeli drone. Now, that hasn't been confirmed by the Israeli authorities, but that is what's being reported in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and that is what this investigation will look into.
And how will the latest attack affect ongoing and already struggling aid efforts within Gaza?
Well, to get an insight into that, there was a discussion between Israel and the United States, and we know from reporting on Axios that the National Security Advisor, the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, warned the Israelis that the UN-backed organization that had previously said Gaza was on the verge of famine, Jake Sullivan warned the Israelis that famine declaration, the third in the 21st century, could be just weeks away. And so certainly that was said before for this strike. Now, on the ground, we know that World Central Kitchen, which had been successfully feeding the starving population of Gaza, has suspended activities. We know that the second ship, which was unloading food into Gaza, had to be turned around. So 240 tons of food still on board, sailing away from the Gaza Strip. So there's no question. And speaking in the last few moments to some of my sources in aid agencies operating in Gaza, they say clearly a suspension of aid by World Central Kitchen and other organizations will only make things worse in the Gaza Strip.
Before we let you go, Alex, let's check in on ceasefire talks and what's the latest there.
Well, we know that the Israelis have put forward a proposal. That proposal has gone through the mediating countries, Egypt, Cairo, the United States, and the ball is now in Hamas's court. We understand from Israeli officials that they say they've shown flexibility on one of the three sticking points. The three sticking points were the full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. That was a demand from Hamas. The answer from Israel there is absolutely not going to happen. The other is a longer-lasting ceasefire, again, something Israel does not accept. Where there has been flexibility on Hamas's demands is for the return of civilians to northern Gaza. On that, the Israeli officials say they have tabled a proposal with more flexibility, but getting a response from Hamas takes time, takes days, because the leader of Hamas is, of course, hiding deep under the ground in the Gaza Strip. It's also going to take time to get a response back out of Gaza. Time, particularly that the families of the hostages who are joining protests here in Israel say the hostages simply don't have.
Yeah, Alex, as always, thank you so much. Alex Cadier reporting live from Tel Aviv.